Oh, I wouldn't say freed. More like under new management.
Hey folks, MasakoX here. Now, it's common knowledge that the likes of Hercule here, whose true name cannot be mentioned due to the fact that the algo will not particularly like me for it, is truly the most wholesome and redeeming of characters in the Dragonball roster. Not to mention the only major character in said show to have never been offed in the entire show's run. Seriously, he's the only one. No joke. This story is not going to be one of those ones where you see him do good, become Earth's true hero, or even being somebody who is somewhat redeemable. No. That's not interesting at all. Today, we're going to look into the possibility of what might have happened had Hercule taken a more self-centered and all-conquering path toward global glory. Pal, it's so much easier doing that with brand deals and merch. Much like how you can get MasakoX merch at masako.cc/store. See what I did there? But yes, as you may all be too familiar with, folks, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. This may sound like a pretty glaring truism to you out there, and something painfully obvious, but we are proven time and time again that if one is given too much power, and said power is placed in the hands of someone who is unprepared or desperate and wanting to cling onto it, it might become a problem not just for the person wielding said power, but also those who live underneath it. Nothing lasts forever. Memento mori. Clearly, Hercule in this story didn't get that memo. But alas, such is the nature of authority that it rarely works well for a person that truly desires it. But for now, as we do with all of our what-if stories, let's set the scene. The age is 767. The Cell games have been and gone. The likes of Hercule, Jimmy Firecracker, and the rest of the Dragon team have witnessed the most spectacular and terrifying battle in the history of planet Earth. On top of having said goodbye to their friend Goku, who gave up his life in vain, but yet his son carried his wishes through for you ultimately. Gohan had defeated Cell, and all the Dragon team were extremely relieved to have heard and seen that. However, in the eyes of Hercule, this was something not ideal. I mean, sure, that Golden Warrior's kid had defeated Perfect Cell, so he wasn't there anymore, Earth was safe, but the champ had to turn the eyes of the populace toward him. In true blustering fashion, Hercule found the likes of the ZTV commentator and his cameraman and pulled them up from the rubble, helping them. He had taken precautions, of course, to look battle damaged by scuffing up his clothing and adding the occasional rip here or there. You know, it was enough. And waxing lyrical to the reporter, the cameraman was able to get audio going again to the populace, and the martial artist once again regaled the awaiting crowds across the world about his defeating of the evil Cell. In the eyes of Piccolo, Vegeta and Trunks, as well as the rest of the squad, Gohan had been the true hero, but to the people of Earth, who were saved from this menace from them, they were shouting a different name. Or more accurately, a couple of names, though some of them will remain unmentioned due to higher authorities getting in the way. Sorry, Mr. Algo. The name that was chanted by the people was Hercule, as he was the one considered to be the hero of Earth. Now don't get us wrong, it wasn't like this Golden Warrior child wanted to claim the title. You can check out our other what if on that topic if you wanted to see what might have happened there. No. In this world, it was very clear to all concerned that Gohan was simply not ready for this gig at this point. He had just lost his father, and he was about to become a big brother to the likes of Goten not long afterward. He was the man of the house at the moment, and Chi-Chi needed her eldest son to look after the house, as well as the likes of Ox King. Fame and scrutiny of that magnitude were not going to help in the long term, even if that did come with the nice little bonus of huge fortune. Hercule, on the other hand, was more than ready. His body was ready. It's not really been explored too much what he got up to prior to winning the 24th Tenkaichi Budokai a week before the Cell Games, but it was certainly a highlight of his career up until then. What we can be certain of, though, is that becoming a martial arts champion had been a long and bumpy ride for him. He was a single parent, providing for his young daughter Videl, dealing with his wife's death even after all this time, taken away from him so cruelly and unfairly. And then, on top of all of that, almost dying to that monstrosity who almost made him look like a fool in front of a worldwide audience. Him being flicked off the ring like that. Thank Kami the camera went dark and that he, a winner, could rewrite history and the future of his and his family's life. In a way, Hercule felt that he actually had more to lose than this golden-haired upstart. Hercule had been hurled into the public eye very recently after years of trying his best to make a name for himself somehow. He had been on TV constantly for weeks now. He couldn't give that up, nor could he be seen as wrong in front of hundreds of millions of people. It was too late. He would never be able to financially recover from this if he told the truth, if he'd been honest, or let the kid get all the plaudits. In the days that followed, Hercule would constantly remind himself that he was doing the right thing. The right person would benefit from this. Nothing would go to waste. And besides, those guys who did all the heavy lifting really, well, they probably dealt with creatures like Cell all the time on a daily basis. This was just another day in the office for them. Nothing special. They wouldn't appreciate the trappings of fame and recognition like he would. Yeah, they were clearly inhuman, so Hercule clearly risked more than they did. They had plenty of things going for them both in power and in chance, and thusly he felt like he genuinely deserved everything that came his way. He was the man of the people. The attention wasn't the best part of the situation, not by a long shot. As I said before, money was very much a factor at play here. The newfound admiration, which in his case was already proving to be pretty big, had given Hercule faith that he could give Videl the best life possible, and they would never again have to worry about making ends meet or having to worry about where the next paycheck's going to come from. All Hercule had to do now was say he wanted to fight someone, and it happened, usually with tens of thousands of zenny attached to it. And even better, he would get almost as much from appearing in front of a camera, hawking some random product. This was the life for him. So that's why, one day, when he was offered the position of Orange City's honourable mayor, he did not complain. Why would he complain? He was now getting the chance to shape an entire city into his image, perhaps even open up a new Satan Castle dojo and really bring in the big bucks. And after all, he thought to himself, it was the will of the people to adore their saviour, and how could he refuse them that very chance? It would look very bad. He would look very entitled if he refused the gig. What would the citizens think? Oh, he didn't take it because, he was too good for them, that he couldn't be bothered to look after them in this way. No, he couldn't be having that. So he gladly accepted. And what was the first thing he did? Well, it was very obvious to him that calling cities by colours felt like a really tacky thing for his liking. Things needed to be more on brand, as it were. So the city's name was changed to Hercule City within days of his appointment, and people did not protest. Why would they? They now lived in the city of the champ. They were proud of this decision, and this only emboldened the big lug even more. During the first year of his tenure, he was regularly seeing statues being erected in his name, each in ever more garish positions and sizes. Streets changing their names in order to commemorate his victories from both the present and his early past. All the attention was focused on one man, and that man was him. He loved it, and the people loved it too. They were a part of something huge and historical, they thought. Sadly, though, there was one hitch with all of this grandstanding in the eyes of Hercule, and it came from the bigwigs upstairs. The one bitter truth in this cocktail of goodness was King Furry himself. He had not exactly been thrilled with all of this fanaticism toward one man that wasn't him in the royal line. So he kept a close eye on him and vetoed some of his more frivolous choices, such as the choice to rename martial arts to Hercule Arts. After some time since the champ became the mayor of now Hercule City, King Furry himself visited to congratulate the incumbent, as well as perhaps give him some advice on how to properly rule, instead of making this place a playground for his brand and commercializing it. And when I say congratulate, that came along with a fleet of tanks to present maybe a 21-gun salute to his face, if it came to that. Along with members of the royal military, the dog monarch had been reported by the media to have been visiting the city to have a friendly chat with the great hero that saved the whole planet from the nefarious Cell. But this was not what it seemed. Hercule knew what this was right from the moment he got the first request for an audience. You see, Hercule may have dodged a lot of responsibility and things in his lifetime of that ilk, but one important life lesson he did remember, and he was a natural at, was seeing a faker from a mile off. The dojo in which he trained taught him a lot about distraction and fake-outs, and so this act of friendship was clear, and you could feel that the monarch, when he was talking his scripted talk, was skeptical about his victory over the notorious Bugman, a hot-button topic indeed. He could tell that the king never truly believed this story, and in reality, he was correct. We know that. On the surface, though, they were cordial with one another, but he could feel that he wasn't trusted, nor that he was going to get what he wanted at the end of it. Yet, for reasons unbeknownst to Hercule at the time, the king did not confront him. Not once. Not one question as to the details behind Cell's defeat was uttered. Hercule, despite his experience, was thrown for a loop. But still, this little visit felt like a warning. A reminder about who was really in charge of planet Earth. Hercule was, through sheer dumb luck, just the mayor of one little city. He would do well to remember that. When Furry had left, at this point, Hercule did not appreciate such behaviour toward him. This old dog had done nothing to stop Cell. And sure, there was that one little attack against Cell before the games, but what good did that do? His precious military was destroyed by the monster in a second, and he, Hercule, had enough dignity at least within himself to stand against the threat head on, albeit ultimately indirectly. Oh, and let's not forget to mention that embarrassing cargo robot incident back from when those aliens invaded a few years ago. That poor depot droid. But wait, why would the king be so brazen in warning the champ, he thought. Could he actually have proof of the Golden Warrior's victory? Or was it only a ruse, a bluff, a ploy? In the end, it didn't really matter. The champion felt that the king was smart enough not to take down an important symbol, an important figurehead such as he. His opinion polls were nearing an all-time low for the king, and he would do well not to undermine the planet's hero at a crucial time like this. But having said that, that role of being a symbol had its limits. It meant that Hercule was not taken seriously in the world of politics and governance. To them, he would always be a gimmick, nothing more. He was ultimately meant to play by the rules, not cause trouble, and be wheeled out for events and the occasional goodwill gesture. Hercule in a way was told to take a walk, and Hercule did not want to be taken for a walk by a dog. So he knew what he had to do. He had to kick things up a gear on his home turf. He made sure that the people of his own city loved him and worshipped him even more. Whatever they wanted, he would give it to them, regardless of the effect it would have on the city's budget. I mean, after all, by taking their attention away from central government, he was also giving them attention. Unwanted attention. Why could their own mayor give them what the king could never do before he arrived? Not only that, but he decided to expand upon the tourism aspect of the city in order to attract more people to either come spend money there, or better yet, maybe move there. Granted, this meant that he spent less time with Videl. This wasn't ideal, but luckily, she had the best tutors and trainers money could buy. One day, she would appreciate this. More prospects came into view. Next year, the Grand King election would occur, and candidates were starting to roll out their campaigns. However, the candidates were very few and had been for decades. Nobody had really dared to challenge King Furry ever since age 733, when he was first sworn in as the next king of a long line of monarch dogs. Sure, there were some opposers, but their campaigns were either not serious or were quickly torn apart by the spin doctors of King Furry. Of course, the king wasn't free from controversy. The whole Beastman craze from ages ago created weird rumours and speculations surrounding the ruler that Furry had originally been a human, that he only used the appearance of a dog to boost his chances of becoming king, making him stand out. But Hercule did not know whether these claims were true, and Hercule planned to be the first non-dog king of Earth in centuries. After all, this old Furry had been ruling for 35 years, it was time for a change, and he was the change. Besides, he was sure that no proof of the Golden Warrior's victory over Cell existed, and that this old dog had been using the oldest trick in the book, bluffing. And so, Hercule decided to call his bluff and take part in the election as a candidate, which notably surprised the king. This campaign also wasn't a token gesture. It had backing. A lot of backing. The campaign took a lot of his time, way more than his standard workday, but he knew that he had to go forward. For Videl, for his own dignity. People needed him. Both candidates were looking strong in terms of popularity. though one was considerably better looking when it came to their physique. Hercule looked the part of being the King of Earth. But finally, the big day came. The royal debate for the title of the king. Furry spent his allotted time talking about tradition, integrity, and variety, hitting well into worries and wants of various social groups. He had been playing this game for a very long time, but people just wanted something new. When it was time for Hercule to speak, he just flexed and looked at his audience before wheeling out this gem of a pep talk.
You know, folks, with all due respect to the king here, I'm pretty sure we've heard that speech 1,000 times before. I'm sure that the king could recite it in his sleep.
A wave of chuckles spread throughout the hall.
Sure, it's nice and nifty, don't get me wrong, but it's been said so many times that it's lost its meaning. In truth, it happened like 3 decades ago. What I want to ask you lot out there is this. Do you feel safe? Do you feel like everything's gonna be alright? That nothing will harm you and those that you love until the day you die? Need I remind you of King Piccolo and his assault on this very palace, who just strode in and took the crown from this pup's puny paws? And what about those Saiyan people? That poor cargo robot? And most notably, Cell. Don't get me wrong, King Furry here is a good man. We all love him in the way that you love your favorite grampy. But the world has changed. Alien creatures from space, freaky mutants, demon kings. I think this may be too much for the poor guy to deal with, but don't worry. I got plenty of experience with that stuff. And if my record shows you anything, you know that I will always have your back.
If King Furry's face could turn red, it certainly would have done right now, having heard that backhanded rhetoric. He growled silently, but his silent protests were drowned out by the thunderous applause. This debate was the nail in the dog's coffin. After it ended, the old monarch approached Hercule, pulling him in close so that no one could hear them.
You are playing a dangerous game, boy. Am I? It sounds like your majesty is threatening me. Be careful what you say next, your highness. You wouldn't want this to find its way into tomorrow's papers, would you? I'm only trying to help you. This position is not as easy as it looks. There's a reason nobody has opposed me until you came along. I know what I'm doing. Good, because I know what I'm doing.
And as such, 2 weeks later, the voting was complete. With a result of 60 to 31 with 9% undecided, Hercule become the new King of Earth, King Hercule. That had a nice ring to it. For his first decree, he decided to host a world tournament, far more decadent and grand than that quaint little Budokai thing. This not only would get people hyped up for their new future as well as having a bit of fun, this would also help him recruit more people into his security forces. Maybe this could actually lure the Golden Warrior out of hiding. Maybe get him out into the open, and he could convince him to work for him, head him off at the pass so that he couldn't undermine him later. Soon he would have more time for Videl, he promised himself, but he couldn't stop right now. He needed to go on and ensure that his rule would be secure and uncontested by anyone. But Videl was still worried. Very worried. She had spent very little time with her dad lately, and this whole obsession about becoming king had changed her father for the worse. The girl sincerely hoped that he wouldn't get into any problems because of this. Will he though? Things have been changing a lot lately, and mostly for the worse. For Videl, it had been a whirlwind of change, and things only got more swept up when her father had won that blasted election. But in every single moment that she ever looked back in retrospect to when things started to lose sense, it always started with Cell. Nothing was the same after her father faced that monster. She was one of only a few people on Earth that knew the truth behind what happened. She knew about this from her father telling her about it in a moment of weakness. For the cameras, she would play ball. Not ruining her father's dreams, obviously. It meant a lot to him. He had earned this moment of glory, that one at least. But something in her mind still forbid her to say defeated Cell with a clear conscience. She knew that he returned, changed her father. It was very odd to describe to oneself. On the surface, he was still his boastful, usual bubbly self. But when there was no one around to witness him, nobody to try and impress or look good for or signing something, he seemed very thoughtful, very withdrawn in himself. unusually so. At first, things weren't too bad. Videl had chalked up these feelings of separation as nerves. Understandable. He had gone from just a potential rising star someday in martial arts in one particular field to now the savior of Earth, everybody loving him. Everybody wanted a piece of her father. Throughout the initial stint of him being a mayor, things didn't seem that different, at least for a while. They were bearable. Hercule did have good intentions going into it, and she respected them. In fact, she allowed herself briefly to embrace the experience. She naturally enjoyed the abundance of gifts and trinkets and activities that he and others would bring her, as well as all the cool and exotic places that they were going to celebrate his victory against Cell. Yeah, that was a good 6 months, she thought. If only things remained that way. But after a while, when things started to become more formulaic and far more driven by admin and red tape, Hercule became busy, slightly losing his touch with his fighting ways. Almost every 20 or 30 feet they walked, they needed to pose with a fan, to speak with an agent on the phone, maybe getting a call from the councillors trying to fix some problems in Hercule City. I mean, more often than not, someone else was caring for her rather than her father. It was an assistant or an intern. And granted, they were nice to her and often tried their best to make her happy, she knew that, but they just changed oh so frequently and so often that for Videl, they just became faceless. She started not even asking them their names. They were all the same, really. One day, though, she was out with her father when she got lost in the throngs of crowds and onlookers. One lady came by her, who was pregnant at the time. She was carrying some shopping and spotted that Videl looked lost. She had no idea who she was, and the lady offered to take her back to her parents. Videl was very grateful for that help from a kind stranger, and the lady was more than happy to help. However, the bodyguards weren't so thrilled. When the lady and Videl got back to the pickup point for the limo, the guards grabbed Videl and pushed the lady away without realizing she was pregnant, not seeming to care for it in fact. But the woman didn't fall back, but landed a right hook on one of the guards in retaliation. This lady was strong. Nobody was going to push her around. Videl was in awe. But then her father came around the corner, and when she turned around to thank the lady, she was gone. Hercule was relieved to see his daughter safe, but even that feeling had been tainted. In the past, her dad used to be a little too overprotective with his larger-than-life personality. But in recent months, she began to even miss that. At least back then, he clearly showed his care and love for her. Despite the unnecessary emotional expressions, it was goofy, but it was genuine. It had become clear to Videl, as she was growing up into a young adult, that competing for the role of King of Earth had become her father's greatest obsession. Gone were the days of training at Saturn Castle, having fun, just simply living, and instead, here, now, were constant meetings, junkets, going over reams of statistics, boring stuff. And while she felt that he had only security and safety in mind, the best of intentions, of course, she could feel that this was wrong for him to do. Since when did he, the mighty Hercule, show any interest or expertise in the art of political theatre? It was just so bizarre to see such a hulking giant hunched over a desk writing down notes for a seminar, going over numbers and crunching sheets and stuff. Okay, maybe it's not that bizarre. Things got so busy that Videl and Hercule would see each other only for sporadic luncheons, and even then, her father was constantly on the phone. Or they had all those bodyguards around them. Yeah, right, bodyguards. This was another annoying thing which got even more pestering when she got her own security detail. They had to follow her everywhere. I mean, it was their job. Videl detested this. But she didn't detest them. I mean, those poor sods were only doing what put food on their tables. On a few occasions though, thanks to her martial arts background, she managed to sneak around them without them looking, running away to have some fun. But when her father started to get wind about this, he got really mad and started firing these bodyguards left and right. She then decided to stop doing this because she didn't want people to lose their jobs because of her. You know, from the 8-foot lummox. It wasn't worth it. Speaking of firing people, her father started to get really impatient. Sure, he was a very impulsive character from the get-go, but he used to be able to wait for things when it called for it. But Videl had noticed that a lot of the workers around the Saturn Castle dojo that she'd grown accustomed to, grew up with, were quickly replaced by people who were let's just say, boring. They were only doing it for the money and not for the passion of the job. The old guard of the castle were very set in their ways and they got things done, but it got done at their pace, not seemingly able to keep up with Hercule's newly found desire for instant results and being king. The old employees weren't that sad though. They were near retirement and took it on the chin. However, Videl couldn't stand it. She had taken it upon herself to save their jobs. She had little battles with her father to keep some of the people that she really liked around. But rarely did she have the chance to have a proper one-on-one discussion with her father. She did the best she could, but it proved to be a losing battle. A normal conversation like they used to have, or maybe a training session in the dojo, these were but distant memories. Now, they could only talk through other people. She was glad that Miss Pizza was still around at least, but even she was incredibly busy these days. Videl rarely had a chance to share her worries with her. There was at least one small victory she had against her dad. This was the fact that after years of sheltering and homeschooling behind the scenes, she was able to choose her own placement of high school. This she held on to with everything she had. A normal high school, a chance to not be in a boarding school, nothing super fancy, just a good but otherwise normal academy, Orange Star High School. She had turned 18 recently, and despite Hercule wanting to control nearly every aspect of her life forever, this was one battle he couldn't win. Well, at least not win and not get extensive media backlash. Still though, Hercule wasn't happy about this. But at the time, he was busy with his royal business and affairs, which allowed her to quickly submit her papers before he could say anything against it. It was too late. He was also told that if he just kept his mouth shut this one time and let Videl do this, her daughter would be in the largest high school in his city. So, good PR. So he got persuaded. Again, not wanting to have hours of justifying controlling his own girl. So when she got to that high school, despite everyone knowing who she was, she could at least pretend to herself that she was a normal girl. The bodyguards had been instructed to not enter the premises, as it would unsettle the other students, and Videl was very much okay with that. But despite this, it was hard to make friends. Making real friends, not hangers-on. Were they scared? Or were they being honest? It was hard to tell. But she was doing well enough that she had some time to do other activities like martial arts. But she knew that she could do more. Do more for the city, for the world. But unlike her dad, not from behind a desk. One day, she acted on her thoughts. She simply started to help the police with the ever-growing crime rates. Her bodyguards weren't that thrilled, but she managed to convince them into following her and told them that this would be their little secret. She would make it worth their while. The bodyguards she had recently had were quite relaxed and they trusted her, since she was grown up. They also know she was pretty strong and tough. She wouldn't get hurt. Right? Well, it was all okay until one criminal act was too much. She did wind up getting hurt. I mean, not terribly, but it was enough to actually dislocate her shoulder, and that's not something you could easily conceal. When Hercule had heard about this, he interrupted his work, visiting her when she was getting medical attention in the school nurse's office.
Who did this to you, sweetie?
Said Hercule with concern, the first flicker of genuine concern he had conveyed in months to anyone. It's nothing. I tripped.
Trip when? Your after-school activities don't require tripping.
Videl looked away. She told Hercule the truth.
What do you mean?
I was just helping the police make the city safe.
Videl, this is not the job for a young lady.
Hercule wasn't mad at her. He never could be truly mad. Not mad, especially after what she said next. I hope that if I made the city at least a little safer, you may have found some time for me. Hercule couldn't speak for a while. He looked away in the mirror. His little girl had to resort to street fighting to get his attention? What was he doing? He'd been the king for a few years at this point, and he was not seeing the obvious thing that was right in front of him. He missed the thing closest to him. He hugged Videl and whispered,
Don't worry, Videl. Daddy will take care of this. I mean, really take care of this.
But before she could say anything else, Hercule stormed off, leaving her in the hands of the doctor. Videl sighed. At least she managed to get through to him in some way. Security. He had to fix it. Make the world better. Starting with his own city and then the world. He met with some shady people who he knew could help with this endeavour, and started something big. Initially, Videl thought that he meant just hanging out with her more often, rebuilding their ties. But the contrary happened. He wound up being more busy. What had happened to that outpouring back in the nurse's office? The only communication she got now from him was a ban on playing police, which, to be fair, she sort of expected, planning to respect that until her shoulder could actually work properly. But she noticed other changes, around her specifically. That cry for help had only made things even more claustrophobic for her. More security details, military instead of the regular bodyguards that she knew. Hercule City now looked like a military stronghold, and this approach was soon emulated in other cities across the planet. Not only that, but lately, some weird laws had been passed, thanks to royal decrees and fast-tracking through the courts, and these acts weren't popular. These greatly limited how people could move around the street, their personal freedom. And Videl heard some rumours, in fact, that the king had planned to give the military permission to search everyone's household without the need of a warrant. They could just show up and demand entry for any reason. That wasn't the conclusion she wanted to get out of her father. She tried to reach out to him, but it only made things worse. All of this curtailing of freedom, that was on her, she thought. It was upsetting her greatly. And surprisingly, the one day which allowed her to kind of forget about some of that stuff was when that new guy turned up at school. He seemed familiar. At first glance, he was a total slouch, but at the same time, she saw some interesting reports from news outlets, and they focused around him. Apparently, there was someone new helping people throughout the city, fighting crime. Though the military types did not appreciate this, they were snuffling in on their turf. But none of them could touch this new force for good. This was a proper superhero, not somebody playing dress-up. This one was named the Great Saiyan Man. As an experiment, she asked some of the remaining detail that were loyal to her to follow this new guy, this Son Gohan, as she had a pretty weird hunch about him. She even checked his surname, and it fitted with a former world martial arts champion from long ago. What was even more puzzling was that the bodyguards couldn't even keep up with this lad. Moreover, he was apparently living not in the city, hundreds of miles away, in fact, in the country. He had no known location in Hercule City, and he was able to commute from Mount Haozu without being late to class. Her bodyguards then suggested turning him into the military, but Videl wasn't sure about that. She tried to approach Gohan directly, but he was acting like a total nerd, and he didn't really realise who she was, which showed that he wasn't very up to date with current affairs. This kid was a total country bumpkin. But one day, when she felt better, she followed him for herself. She still was sneaky enough to escape the bodyguards, as she witnessed Son Gohan changing into his superhero uniform. She confronted him, much to his horror, as he was in a hurry to save people. She said that she could help too, and as such, they saved people from a flaming building nearby. And after that, she demanded to be taught how to fly, and taken away from here, or she would reveal his secret to all. She was serious. She looked just about done with life in this city, and reluctantly, Gohan didn't want to lose his freedom, so she had to go with her plan, as he took her hand and flew off. The poor bodyguards only witnessed the scene of them flying into the distance. Their charge was gone, and they had to talk to the boss.
Sir, we have a problem.
What? Send planes after him! Military! Special forces! Get my baby back, you buffoons! I want everything we got against that heathen!
His two guests were watching this display of anger with a certain curiosity.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, but my daughter got herself into trouble again, and I had no choice but to react. Could you remind me what your name was, short sir?
Oh, it's nothing, Your Highness. I assure you, we understand. My name is Great Barbody, but you can call me Master.
Through the door, the guards could hear a scream, but they just chalked that up to being one of the many outbursts from their boss. No one questioned it, as well as the new tattoo that His Royal Highness now had on his forehead. In this timeline, something was badly wrong. Something completely untoward had started to happen within the Dragon World. Earth's defensive forces were put into a readying stance, on the cusp of doing something rather drastic, as their new orders were issued to the military forces. All of this coming from the king himself. What had happened? Was this some kind of new foe, ready to destroy the world? Had Cell come back? No, princess had been taken. To some, this seemed rather drastic and out of proportion, but those voices were very quiet since they wanted to keep their job. The individual known as the Great Saiyan was their target. That freedom fighter had been allowed to romp around since he hadn't posed a threat yet, but now he had struck. He had to be captured. The kidnapping the king's daughter. At Capsule Corp, nerves were being strained. Bulma knew that if he were captured Gohan and his garb inspected, it would all come back to her company for assisting him. Granted, she was slightly more concerned for Gohan's safety, but in this climate of tension, Hercule was capable of doing anything, including bringing down her family's business into state control by force. But as she was weighing up the situation, Bulma could hear a rather irritated yell coming from her living room, a rather irked drawl.
Ugh, what's this idiot got himself into now?
She peered into the room. It was Vegeta, beer in hand, yelling at the TV. Pictures of the incident plastered on the screen. You mean Gohan or the king? Vegeta turned to Bulma and gave her a small smirk, their humour on point in that moment. He turned back to the TV.
Both, if I'm honest. They're both acting like imbeciles. If the rumors are true, Gohan did this over some girl. I knew that stupid costume would come back to bite him. And you, Bulma.
Bulma tried to hide her own personal concerns with sass, a tried and tested method with the prince. Ah, are you afraid that Gohan is stealing your spotlight in the screwing up department? Vegeta groaned.
Look, that was a long time ago. And I do know that this is some idiotic misunderstanding. But this bumbling fool of a king may escalate that to a level that can really make our lives insufferable. If this comes back to you, that oath could end everything your family built.
You really think so? She was glad to hear that her husband was on the same page in that regard. But Vegeta wasn't done yet.
Perhaps it's time I intervene before it gets that far.
He got up and put on his gloves. Wait, where do you think you're going? He gives his wife a knowing look.
Stopping the boy from screwing up. After all, that's my department.
He winked at Bulma.
I'm going to go and find that boy and knock some sense into him. Jeez. Out of all women he could have hooked up with, he had to choose the king's daughter.
When I look at his father and yourself, I can see a certain pattern forming. Vegeta blushed. You really think it's about this? That this is Gohan's rebellious streak? Vegeta gave off a pensive aura.
I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Before I go, tell Trunks that if he gets any ideas about kidnapping some rich guy's kid as his potential love interest, I'll ground him personally.
Bulma nodded. Well, have fun then. Try not to go too hard on him. And as such, Vegeta headed out to sense where Gohan's energy was heading. Thankfully though, it was going to the usual place, so it wasn't too hard tracking him. As Detective Vegeta was establishing himself on the case, Gohan and Videl were blissfully unaware of any of the mess that he and her had created, because he was busy training Videl, teaching her how to fly and things like that, the usual stuff. And as for the training itself, well, it was quite the long slog. But he had to admit that the girl was making massive progress for somebody who had never tapped into their own life energy before. She was learning relatively quickly. He had to check himself sometimes, in fact, that not everybody could easily engage with their ki. To some, they didn't even know they had ki to engage with in the first place. And also, needless to say, both Videl and Gohan grew fond of each other, as teenagers often do when they're in close quarters with one another. I mean, they had been gone for several hours, alone, and some of their formal attitudes had melted away, as they had gotten down to the business of training. No, bad viewer, stop it. It would probably have developed even further had it not been for a certain somebody getting in the way. A pretty loud and irritated prince.
Hey you! Lovebirds!
At first, both of them blushed at the mention of that term to describe them. But Gohan then quickly recognized that voice, and the color on his face drained rapidly. Oh man, what was Vegeta doing here? And how did he know about Videl? Vegeta glided down to meet the pair and promptly grabbed Gohan's top, pulling him in close.
Do you have any idea what sort of problems you two have caused?
Gohan was waving his hands around frantically, in innocence. What? We're not doing anything. I was just showing Videl how to use ki. Vegeta gripped tighter.
Not that boy!
Videl, though, was less scared and more confused. Do you know this loud and obnoxious man? Also, he was flying like you do. Gohan sighed and fessed up. Videl, this is Vegeta, my father's friend. Vegeta rolled his eyes. They were not friends. But Gohan was more curious, though, about why Vegeta was here and what he had just said. Wait, what do you mean by trouble?
You really shouldn't have taken that girl, Gohan. Her father's only gone and set the entire planet's defenses on you. Not only that, but people are being arrested about nothing, questioned about your movements. I saw this for myself on the way here. Luckily, the military haven't figured out how to look up yet.
Videl could not believe this. Her father, surely he wouldn't have gone that far to get her back. Would he? Well, he had. She checked her TV watch to fact-check this, what Vegeta had said, and realized that this high forehead, spiky-haired fellow was right. About everything. The two of them were all over the news, and what was her father thinking about that tattoo? Was that his own cry for help? What did that M even mean? Miguel? Her mother? But her mind was clear, though. Gohan, we have to go back and set this all straight. You need to get me back there. Training can wait. Yeah. Gohan didn't need telling twice, but she just smirked.
Your woman is smart, I'll give her that.
Helping Videl to take her first real flight on her own, Gohan put his helmet on and decided to head off for the king's residence to straighten things out before the entire planet was consumed in all-out mindlessness. Vegeta followed them to make sure they stayed on target, not getting any ideas. This wasn't just about some idiots getting arrested and everyone being nervous. It was all about the comfort of the life he had during those years. This was for himself. He didn't want Capsule Corp being overrun with government toadies, and then his own existence being brought into question. If he then got attached to that East City incident all those years ago, then things would start getting difficult for him too. No more plush lifestyle fit for a prince anymore. But then this dawned on him. What was he thinking? This isn't the way a prince should think. He felt sickened by this thought of desiring cushiness. He realized that he had grown too attached to all of this luxury and sedateness, and it prompted him to then react. A few years ago, this would have all been the boy's business solely, to fix his own mess. Yeah, he was repaying a debt to him, saving his life all those years ago, though he was entirely sure that the entire Defense Force of Earth would not have posed a threat to Gohan anyway, even if it really tried. But still, it was a massive threat for peace. And that internally felt wrong to him right now, that attachment to peace. After Kakarot had died, he thought he would never fight again. Was he losing his warrior spirit? He should be enjoying the idea of this challenge. He should be yearning to stomp the bumbling fool calling himself the king and his little army, showing how moronic they all were, how this whole charade was moronic. But instead, he was going down the route of diplomacy. Hey, Vegeta, thanks for letting us know. I guess we really messed up, huh? Vegeta was lost in thought.
Yeah, no problem.
As they were approaching Hercule City, they witnessed the full mobilization of troops. It had spiraled out of control. Badly so. When the men noticed 3 flying figures approaching, finally looking up, they opened fire without question. This forcing Gohan to try and cover Videl from the incoming bombardment. We have to get in closer, so they'll recognize Videl and stop! Vegeta brushed armaments aside with his ki.
If we get any closer, they'll keep shooting us more!
Vegeta was getting tired though of this mess, and fired some non-lethal ki blasts in order to destroy some of the weaponry, to allow Videl and Gohan to indeed get closer and land. The remaining shots had shattered a part of Gohan's helmet off, and Gohan shouted out loud, "Stop! I'm here to talk! I brought Videl home! She was never in any danger! Cease your fire, idiots! It's me!" The soldiers decided to inform the king, who decided to get down there pronto, with his new security chief in tow. And said security chief looked very weird. He had red skin and a matching tattoo. He also had, apparently, an assistant of his own. A yellow-skinned, short fellow that kind of looked like a potato. Some of the security guards were holding weird contraptions too, something that neither Gohan or Vegeta had ever seen.
Well, so you decided to return my daughter after all, you cowardly...
Hercule paused for a second, after looking at the part of Gohan's face visible from under the shattered helmet. It had been a few years, but he recognized those eyes. That look. The Golden Warrior.
So that's what this all was about. You were here to steal my thunder.
Videl got in between the two men. No, Dad, you got it all wrong!
Be quiet, young lady! I'll deal with you later.
Videl was shocked to see her dad that riled up and uncaring about her own safety.
Deborah, could you deal with this blasted ruffian?
The security chief grinned widely.
With pleasure, sir.
Gohan took a defensive stance. Wait, I don't want to hurt you. Being used to the power of the soldiers, Gohan did not anticipate for a second the power of that incoming hit that this Deborah fellow actually had. He felt that punch, much to his and Vegeta's surprise. They hadn't felt that kind of power since the days of Perfect Cell. So, the two had to start to duke it out for real. Gohan avoiding a few spit shots that hit bystander soldiers, turning them into stone. Gohan had to actually go Super Saiyan 2 to match this guy. Alright, the boy was really slacking, or the king got into contact with some powerful forces that he did not understand. Still, the fight was really flashy, and Gohan had to show his entire power to keep up. Meanwhile, as this was going on, Vegeta looked at the smaller one. He didn't look worried that Gohan was evenly matched with this horned freak. But what's this guy's deal? But finally, Gohan was able to beat down the chief of security. He was very tired by that encounter though. The king was mad.
You monster! You have no right beating up my strongest asset like that!
Barbary waved his hand in a calm manner.
Oh, no worries, your highness. I'm in the process of getting a new security chief anyway.
Vegeta pondered for a moment, wondering what he meant by that, and then looked at those devices. The Gohan looked pretty weakened. The prince knew he had been slacking, but this was uncharacteristic. But in that moment, when he slowly started to figure out what was going on with this charade, some intrusive thoughts got into his head. Thoughts of him having to deal with that boy's mess. Thoughts of owing this boy his life. The boy that gave up a large portion of his training and now had gotten himself into an idiotic superhero farce. Thoughts of his Saiyan nature being quashed by this unbearably sweet, comfy life. Vegeta started to giggle, attracting Gohan's attention. Vegeta, what is He paused, seeing an M had appeared on the older Saiyan's forehead.
I could not have beaten your worthless father, but you will do.
And that first blast sent Gohan flying. Videl was terrified. Vegeta had turned on them, siding with her father seemingly. She had to do something. That small guy, that little potato, he had something to do with this, with her father and all the others. Her dad had been tricked, that was it. He didn't come up with this on his own. He had that M belt buckle whatever thing on. This guy, this potato was pulling the strings. She ran toward Barbary. Hey, stop whatever you're doing, you little... But when Vegeta saw movement, he just sent a ki blast in that direction. A huge explosion which ensued, tossed everyone around like rag dolls. The dust blew up. Gohan, weakened and beaten up, tried to call for Videl, but he couldn't see her anywhere. And what's even worse, Vegeta was more than ready for a fight. Hercule was watching the whole scene go down from under some rubble. Abominations. All of them. But wait, where's Videl? Where's his little angel? He touched his own bleeding forehead as he yelled for his daughter, but the yell was drowned out by a sound of ki blasts cascading around him, being sent the Golden Warrior's way. The dust still wasn't settling. The battle was on. Mark, do you promise? Will you take care of her?
Yes, darling. Of course I will. I'll take care of you both. We'll see her grow up together.
Always the optimist.
You know me. I believe in myself, but that's nothing when you compare it to how much I believe in you. And Videl, my love.
Everything was but a din and utter chaos. The ringing in his ears was unbearable. The dust was still settling. It had felt like ages since the initial blast, but these two Golden Warriors were still there, unmoved, staring each other down. The younger one seemed more tired, but the other one that just a moment ago seemed like his ally had completely changed, not only the colour of his hair, but also in their tone. A part of Mark's mind knew that he was now his ally, and yet the other parts of said mind screamed at full volume that he wasn't. Mark wiped off some errant blood from his forehead that had been slowly dripping over that strange M symbol that he never dared to question before. As he looked around, he could only see the rubble from the battle. And when the older Golden Warrior started to bombard the younger one with orbs of light energy once more, he slowly started to realize what had just happened. His pupils dilated. A stream of thoughts had started to course through him. He yelled his daughter's name yet again from the top of his lungs, but the ringing in his ears was still there, showing no signs of stopping. This, connected with the ongoing battle, had caused Mark to not be able to hear his own scream. When a stray ball of light was heading his way, the younger Golden Warrior did everything he could to block it, to keep it away from Mark. He was on the defensive. Why? Why would he be on the defensive? If he wanted to mock him? If he wanted to turn his daughter from him and corrupt her? Was it because he wanted to torment him more? To make him feel small? Was it because he wanted to take his throne? A flashback flooded his head, to the time when his beloved Miguel was alive, and he had taken her to his dojo for the first time.
I'm not a big fan of this Satin Castle place, Mark. I'm sure there has to be a better place for you to train yourself in the martial arts.
But baby, for the first time, I think I'm good at something. Sure, I had a lot of luck, but the master seems to see potential in me.
You wouldn't need all that luck if you just believed in yourself. You're trying too much to become a person your master wants you to be, instead of looking at who you really are. I wish you could see yourself the way I do.
Thank you, Miguel. I promise. I promise that after the training is done, I'll earn us enough prize money, and you won't need to sing in those seedy places again. We'll get married and have a huge home.
They're not that seedy, and you are good enough. You don't need this place. But if that's what you really want...
I promise you, you won't regret it.
He was wrong. It hit him harder than Cell throwing him off of the ring and into that plateau years ago. He misjudged the intentions of the Golden Warrior. Now, seeing that young boy, about Videl's age in fact, struggling for his life, and yet taking time to make sure that he wouldn't be hit by this projectile was Videl. He needed to find Videl. He started to dig through the rubble, seeing from the corner of his eye that his security guards were now holding those weird contraptions aimed at the two fighters, whilst Deborah was resting next to his small companion after all the hits he had received. Issue for later though. Find Videl first. Find Videl. Find Videl. He heard a loud sound as the older combatant had punched the younger one into a building. Mark used this opportunity to cover more terrain. The jewel was thankfully moving away from him, so he could then get to check another part of the rubble, undetected. He was digging through it with his bare hands, effectively cutting them a bit with the process. Small pieces of glass and concrete were flying about the place, and when he had lost all hope, he saw a pale arm sticking out from under a huge piece of concrete. He mustered all his strength to raise it, adrenaline pumping his power up to superhuman levels. He had found her.
Daddy, you're back! Can I visit Mommy tomorrow?
Videl,
You look sad, Daddy. I know what will cheer you up. A hug.
Videl, my little angel.
There. Hugs from Mommy always make me feel better.
Videl, I need to tell you something.
What is it, Daddy?
It's about Mommy.
Can we see her tomorrow, Daddy?
Videl, listen to me. You know that I love you more than anything in the world, right?
I love you too, Daddy.
I'll take good care of you. I promise.
Daddy?
We need to be brave for Mommy. Mommy is with Grandma and Grandpa now.
Can we see them?
We'll say goodbye to her.
Well, I don't want to say goodbye to Mommy.
Neither do I, Videl. Neither do I. But remember, Mommy will never be truly gone, all right? She'll always be with us. Just invisible.
Invisible?
Yeah, she will. She'll always be with us, okay? We've got to show how brave we are.
Okay, but if she's with us, then why are we crying?
Because we miss her. And it will take some time until we get to see her again.
Daddy?
Yes, sweetie?
I'll take care of you too.
Her face was motionless, her mouth slightly open, her eyes lifeless. He had seen this face once in his life before, and he prayed to Kami he would never have to see it again. He roared loudly, like a hurt animal, hugging her lifeless body to his chest, and then he started to weep.
I'm sorry. Sorry. This is all my fault. I'm sorry.
Despair was consuming him like a tidal wave. He had failed. He had failed everyone. It was all his fault. Miguel was right. He was so obsessed with his own self-image that it cost him her life, his daughter's life. He was a failure, a complete failure. But the despair washed away that annoying voice in his head at least. He looked at the atrocious little scum that had made him do this. Sadness was overwhelming him, but so was his fury. He knew his plan. He planted it in his head, but he no longer was under his control. Like a wild animal, he ran towards the security men holding that contraption aimed at the two golden warriors, and as it was about to fill up, he punched one of them and smashed that wretched thing into dust. Barbody screamed furiously.
Do you have any idea what you have done, you foolish lug?
You murdered my girl, you little scummy!
Mark started to walk toward the wizard with a murderous intent.
Deborah, do something!
And at that moment, the devil-like creature, despite his weakened state, leapt toward him with his sword. He could see that the being had infused that blade with its power, and he stabbed Hercule through the chest. The wound was burning. He collapsed on the floor, suffering.
This will give you a slow and painful death for messing with my plan. We'll have to get another one of those from the ship.
So it was all for nothing. Not only did he not stop anyone, now he was dying. He looked at Videl and tried to apologize once more. Even the Golden Warrior was weakening. If he only could unleash the same fury he used during that fight with Cell, he could have won. That fight with Cell. He had a brief flashback of this mechanical man talking to him. His last real act of bravery before any of this happened. He looked toward Videl and later toward the Golden Warrior, and he used the last of his strength that he had in his lungs to shout,
Golden Warrior! Look what they did to my girl!
The boy turned his head with a shocked expression, and then he saw Videl. This time, he screamed like he did all those years ago. And as the lightning started to consume his body, he caught the fist of the older man, much to his surprise.
Oh, I see you finally start to show some of that power. So you're not a total letdown as I thought you were.
Gohan forcefully grabbed Vegeta by the neck and showed him Videl's corpse.
Look what they did! We were played, Vegeta! I don't care! I let him into my head. I was tired of all this comfiness. I despised the fact that I had started to enjoy it. I started to lose my own Saiyan warrior pride.
Gohan looked at him for a moment, like he could not believe what he was hearing. After he had finished, he only uttered one sentence. You utter failure. Vegeta looked at him confused. But Gohan grabbed his neck and pulled him toward the ground. Then he started to smash him into said ground repeatedly.
Is this your Saiyan pride? All that senseless destruction?
He grabbed him by the hair and showed him the destruction around him. Vegeta freed himself and gave Gohan some sizable hits in retaliation. But the boy was right now in full berserk mode as he broke Vegeta's arm. The older Saiyan yelled in pain.
Was what Cell did with you your Saiyan pride? Or was it when he killed Trunks? Huh?
He continued to beat Vegeta senseless, and it was obvious that the prince's enjoyment of this battle, this encounter, was starting to decrease massively.
I am the prince of all...
Gohan punched him in the gut.
You are a prince of a cemetery!
Vegeta tried to gasp for air, as Gohan had beaten him out of his Super Saiyan transformation. Next, he placed his foot against his throat.
Finish it,
he muttered. Gohan looked at Vegeta with all the fury and hatred he could muster, but in a split second, cooled off. No, you failed Bulma and Trunks, but that you can still fix. Go home, and never fight me again. I'm not like my father. I'm not fighting for sport. And if I see you causing mayhem again, I won't kill you, but I will make you hate fighting with every fiber of my being. And he kicked Vegeta away like a rag doll, as if it were the end of it. Then he set his gaze on Barbody and Deborah. Barbody tried to seize the moment and get into his mind, but Gohan sensed what he was trying to do and vaporized the wizard with a single blast, like he was just a mere bug on his shirt. A weakened Deborah looked at him, seeing that the M symbol on his own forehead was starting to disappear.
I'm no longer under his control. A truce, my friend, will be wise right now. I have many powerful allies that...
I don't care, uttered Gohan, as he grabbed Dabura's sword by the blade and used it to behead the Demon King with his own weapon. Then he could power down, sensing no further threat, breathing slowly and walking up to Hercule.
I'm so sorry, boy. The things I did.
You were under his control. Breathe slowly.
They murdered my little girl.
We can bring her back. We have ways of doing that, sir. Don't worry. Hercule's eyes lit up.
Can you? Why didn't you wish your father back?
He thought he attracted too much danger to Earth, sir. But as long as she's willing to return, we can do that.
I need you to take care of her. I'm not gonna make it.
I'll get help. Wait here.
No. Listen. I'm sorry.
Hercule stopped moving. He closed his eyes. Sadly, just as he was crouching over him, some soldiers arrived. They started to shoot at Gohan's direction.
The Great Saiyaman has murdered the king!
Gohan just destroyed their weapons and got out of there, launching into the air, leaving them to tend to the king's corpse. They would never know the truth. They would never know that the king had forgiven him. Before he left, he also checked for Vegeta. He was no longer there. He had scurried away. The last thing he did was asking Piccolo to find the Dragonballs. After that, Gohan wasn't seen for a very long time. Sometime later, Piccolo and Gohan were standing over the 7 magical orbs.
You know, we can always ask Shenron to erase people's memories of...
Gohan shook his head. No, it would be not fair to manipulate people like that. I don't want it to be like this.
But this effectively has ruined your scientific career. You're now the most hated man on Earth, you know that.
I can live with that. Besides, Vegeta was right. I should have been training all this time and preparing for more threats. Without Dad around, this is all on me.
Don't let the prince get in your head, Gohan. Don't listen to him.
Thank you. But let's revive the victims. And they did so. Gohan asking Shenron for one small additional favor, sending Videl to their location. Sure enough, she popped up, alive and well.
Gohan? What happened?
He slowly started to tell the whole story, with Piccolo helping. As she collapsed when hearing about her dad's death, he held and hugged her.
But can't you guys bring him back, as you did with me?
Sadly not. He was killed by wounds caused by a demonic being. We don't know of a power that can bring someone back from that.
So in the end, he saved us all.
She wiped out her tears.
But now I need to go back and rectify everything. Tell people that you were the one that stopped Cell. And that wizard.
Don't. They need a hero to believe in, Videl. They only remember the good stuff about your dad now. And I can live with being hated. She looked at him in awe, but also in fear.
They think I'm dead. If this is your will, then I will come with you. Videl?
You want to get stronger to protect people. Despite them hating you, we'll get stronger. Together. Piccolo looked at Gohan.
You're gonna need some company. Besides, I can help you two a bit as well. You need someone that will send messages to your mother and brother as well. They're not taking this grade.
Gohan nodded. Thank you. Both of you. And despite so many things going wrong that day, something good happened. Something new was born. Vegeta never told Bulma of what exactly occurred that day. She pitied him being controlled by the wizard. Gohan never told them the truth. After the last vestige of Barbody's magic was gone from his mind, Vegeta felt like a fool. And what's more, he felt dissatisfied. And as he was sitting on that comfy sofa, licking his wounds, Vegeta knew in his heart that he would never fight again. And that's where we end things. So what did you folks think? Do you think this was a good way to end an otherwise bizarre series? How do you expect Gohan and Videl to move forward from now? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I will see you in the next video. Catch you later.